Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the BigFooty Bombercast. I'm your host, Bonser34. I am joined this week by the man who's come back from beyond the grave, and that is Grizz. How are you?
I'm good, Bonds. Back from the grave is tad strong, but I am back kicking. I'm happy to have some Bombers back on TV, although listening to the lead up to the AFLW season with Crowded House last week was really enjoyable. But unfortunately, the boys couldn't get the chocolates on Friday night despite the occasion.
Yeah, so we will talk about the game in a moment, but I will just preface it by saying I found the game very boring to watch, but I'll explain why in just a short moment. What I'm actually interested in is your opinion on the pre-game. So I'll be honest. I'll say right now, I actually didn't mind the pre-game. I enjoyed it, and I get there's people out there that are frustrated because they're living in the past. But at the end of the day, it's our 150th anniversary. It was the big party. So whether we were 9-2 or 2-9, as unfortunately we were always going to have some sort of celebration. And okay, things aren't going well now, but that doesn't mean obviously you don't celebrate the past. So I thought it was good and I didn't have any issues with it, but what were your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually enjoyed it. I thought, it was a bit nostalgic, which is the whole point of the exercise. 150 years is a big achievement. Like there's sporting clubs all over the world that are 150 years old. And we talk about teams in America and the Premier League in England, and half the teams in Europe, soccer teams in Europe wouldn't be 150 years old. So I think it's meant to be a little bit corny, a little bit nostalgic, but I enjoyed it. I sort of separated it completely from the game and enjoyed it for what it was. And seeing guys like Hurd and Lloyd and Danaher there, I actually sort of enjoyed it. The game didn't sort of dampen it for me. And it's a proud thing being around for 150 years. And I think people who get stuck about it, we're being stuck in the past, or I think you just look at something to be upset about. That's the whole point of celebrating your 150th anniversary.
Yeah, I was interested to see the way that James Hurd was received. And I tell you what, it wouldn't have surprised me if halfway through his walkout that Xavier Campbell had just announced that we were about to re-sign him as coach, because it was a very interesting reception, and it's certainly something that I've never really given much credence to. But after seeing how well he was received and the smoke and all that sort of stuff, I did suddenly realise that it probably wouldn't surprise me if Truck was moved on for James Hurd. But we'll have to
have that conversation at some point, because I'd be fascinated to know your views on it.
We will touch on that conversation, I think, if it is a
if
possibility.
Required. Yeah.
Yes. But we will move straight to the game. So I said that I thought it was a fairly boring game. And the reason I thought it was boring was because it was very end-to-end and there wasn't much really going on, especially in terms of the scoreboard. If you look at the second half, we kicked 2 goals 8. Carlton kicked 3 goals 4. It was a bit of a snooze fest, really. I mean, that second quarter when they got on top and kicked 5-3 to 2-2, that lost the game. Other than that, I thought we matched it with them, which is pleasing in one aspect, because obviously, Chera went down for them, but we obviously lost Darcy. So they sort of cancelled each other out. So, at the end of the day, you look at it and go, well, Carlton are a top 4 side. We ran with them for probably 2 3/4. It's not a bad result, but it just wasn't a game that filled me with, I don't know, any moment. I never really thought we were in it.
Yeah, what you finished on is exactly what I was about to say. Like, BT and Luke Hodge were trying their best on the telecast to amp it up, but at no point did I seriously think we're sort of in a position to challenge Carlton. They got out to about that 4-goal lead at halftime, and it never really got closer than 22, 23 points. We seemed to match them in the contest. The contested possessions and the clearances were really close, but they had 60 more uncontested possessions and 33 more marks, and that was indicative of what was happening. As soon as they got it out to the outside of the contest, they were just slaughtering us on transition. And when we got it out of the contest, it was a real battle to get that upfield. And Carlton are probably where we're looking to be in a couple of years' time. I mean, their key position stocks with McKay and Curnow and Silvani and Wiedering when he's fit. Their key position stocks are right in that sweet spot, and they just sort of tortured us 1v1, and that was partly because of their system, which was better than ours, but also, if we can't defend in space, I don't know whether our running power is low. We're just completely unorganised. There's probably a combination of everything. But at no point were we really in the match. I didn't, even when we were sort of level with them at quarter time, it felt a bit artificial, to be honest. I felt like Carlton were going to whip away with it at any point. But with the games for the rest of the season, I don't know where you're at, but I'm not really looking at the win-loss column. If we get blown out by 80 points, I'm going to get concerned. But I'm really looking at sort of individual performances, who's performing well. I thought Dylan Shield had his best game in 2 years. He was outstanding for us, winning a lot of clearances, He laid 10 tackles, so the physicality was back, 8 clearances, 10 tackles, busting a gut to get back defensively, which is really good to see. I also think Sammy Draper had his best game all year as well. He was taking contested marks, kicked a couple of goals, dominating the ruck, with the exception of that sort of free kick against Cripps in the opposition goal square. But yeah, I thought those two were probably standouts.
Yeah, I thought somebody said to me during the game that Draper was either he was either playing like Billy Smets or he was playing like Wayne Carey. There was no in between. He had some really good moments, and then he had some absolute shockers that just left you going, "What is he thinking?" So, but you're right. He did play his best game of the year, so full credit to him. And Dylan Shield, I thought was, as you said, was also very good. And I mean, his tackling numbers were up, obviously, but over the year, he's actually been one of our more prolific tacklers. And I think people just forget that because they just want to yell about how he doesn't run both ways and he doesn't do this and he doesn't do that, because they just want to talk about the fact we gave up 2 first-round draft picks, which is certainly not Dylan Shield's fault. So I think sometimes the fact that, he probably is playing a little bit better than what's given credit for is missed. But yeah, no, he was outstanding on Friday night, and it did come about with Darcy being
off,
which is interesting. It might be a little concerning. Are we seeing the sort of issue that Hawthorn have had with Mitchell and Warple can't play together?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Darcy had his best year last year where Dylan basically missed the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And Dylan plays his best game of the year when Darcy goes off in the first quarter. There's a legitimate question here of, well, okay, are there too many cooks in the kitchen in terms of the midfielders and whether sort of Parrish and Shield play too similar a role?
Yeah, and I don't think that's exclusive to those guys either, because it has sort of been said before that we do have a very similar midfield in that Merritt can also go. Merritt can get 40 touches without even thinking about it if he really wants to. He seems to have stopped that sort of play, though. He doesn't seem to just rack up the touches for the sake of racking them up. I think he's yielded that to Darcy, and as a result, I think Zach's disposal is a lot more damaging now. I think when he gets the ball, it's more noticeable because he's probably picking better options than what he was doing previously.
Yep.
I just don't think Dylan Shield or Darcy Parrish have that string to their bow like Zach does. And then you throw in an Andrew McGrath, who I actually still think if you just let Andrew McGrath be a ball hunter instead of defensive mid, I think he could also rack up the touches with ease. So there is that concern, as there has been for a while now, the point of difference. The other one that I do want to mention, though, and I thought it was great for his, he hasn't played a great deal of footy this year and he hasn't played much AFL, but I thought Harrison Jones really gave us something Friday night. And he clearly was something that the side's been missing for a while. Unfortunately, big 2 metre Peter, after all the raps we've given him, has sort of disappeared a little bit. A lot of that is to do with the fact that we're now sitting the ball on his head instead of putting it down in front of him. But it's also to do with the fact that his lead patterns are a little bit, I don't want to say lazy, but he has done a lot of what I don't like from a forward, which is stand and point. I don't like forwards that stand and point. You have to move. At some point, you have to move. And he's not doing that right now. He's standing, pointing. Then when it's coming, he's stopping, standing, and trying to take the mark above everyone else because he's 2 meters tall. So, I thought Jones just gave us that point of difference.
Yeah, I think I'll touch on right first. I think teams have figured out his one wood, which is what you said, running and jumping at the football that's out in front of him, and they're now blocking his run. They're working on the basis of, okay, if Peter Wright kicks 6, there's a chance. If we can stop Peter Wright, we'll let Matt Guelphy and Devon Smith beat us if they can, or whoever it was, Francis or whoever was playing forward. We'll stop Wright kicking 6 and see if the rest of them can beat us, which they can't. Which is what makes Harrison Jones so important. Really just straightens us up from a structural point of view. Took up a really good contested marks, which is good to see. That ankle doesn't look like it's bothering him. Goal kicking was better this week. I think I could mount a pretty good argument that he's our most important or probably our most valuable player over the next 5 years. I think if Harry Jones turns into the forward I think he can be, our trajectory is a lot better. Whereas if he's continues to get injured, I think we're in a bit of spot of bother. I think he might be our most sort of important player to get right in the next 5 years. But he's showing signs. 2 goals, which is pretty good considering the delivery on the weekend. I think, we probably still need another genuine forward. I think Draper and Phillips resting forward just doesn't do it. I think, Stewart played forward on the weekend and seemed to do it pretty well. Maybe you bring him in, play 3 genuine tall forwards with Stewart or Wright in the ruck, chopping them out, just as a different look. But I thought, Caldwell and Shield had moments. Archie Perkins just needs to play the rest of the season in the midfield. I don't care who you have to kick out of the rotation to do it. But Perkins just needs to play as a midfield. He's one of the more dynamic players we have in there when he's there. But I think there was just a lot of effort, which was fine. But once again, and we said this against Richmond, said it multiple times this year, effort was there. Execution really bad, and Carlton just sliced us up.
Yeah, so I'm glad you actually mentioned him, because I was about to bring up the fact that James Stewart, and you said he did pretty well. I think that's underselling it, to be honest, in the VFL. He had a bit of a day out. He did play that centre half forward role. He had 22 touches, kicked 3 goals, took 8 marks, laid a few tackles. He was very impressive up forward, and I know that he's been playing full back for us, but obviously now I think they've decided, look, Zach Reed's going to be down there, Laverde's going to be down there. I still think we need to bring Zerk Thatcher in, because I still think we're playing one too many short if we're going to get Ridley to play that third tall role.
Or Brand.
Or Brand.
Brand was pretty...
Brand also had a ripping game on the weekend in the VFL, you're right. So James Stewart, yeah, look, I think he comes in this week. If he comes in as a forward. I do think that probably means that Sauce Phillips, who hasn't done a lot wrong since he came in, but then again, I didn't think Nick Bryan had done a lot wrong since he came in either, but they've clearly decided that Draper's going to be the number one ruck come hell or high water. So I think Phillips comes out, and it does mean that you can put Wright into the ruck. Now, we've both been reluctant to do that because it meant that we had nobody else to kick to. But now you've got Jones and potentially Stewart down there, and I wouldn't be putting Stewart in the ruck. I just don't think that translates well at AFL level. I think you can afford to have Peter go in there for 5 minutes to chop out type thing.
Yeah, especially with Stringer in the forward line again as well. You and I were reticent, I think, to put him in the ruck because we said no structure forward the ball, but you bring in Stewart, right rucks, you've still got Stewart, Jones and Stringer ahead of the ball. That's more than enough firepower in terms of your tools to at least structure yourself up in a way which is going to be efficient going forward. And I wonder if we get 2 genuine key forwards up there at all times, we might see a bit faster ball movement. But talking about VFL, I don't know if you watched much about the VFL, but we had our 2 mid-season draft boys in there. In Massimo D'Ambrosio, I feel like I've butchered that name. I said it horrifically poorly, but and Jai Menzie. I thought Menzie did okay for a small forward. He kicked a couple of snags, which I was surprised to see. I don't remember him kicking them, but it's probably a sign of a good small forward. It was a scrappy game for a crumbing forward. The ball was sort of getting hung up in the air everywhere, and it was pretty sort of between the arcs sort of game. But I thought D'Ambrosio was outstanding, and we could really use him coming off half back at the moment. Just his risk taking, his ball use was really good.
Yeah, I think you're right. I have a feeling that he will play this week. I don't want to go so far as to say I'd lock it in, but I'd be stunned if he didn't make his debut on Friday night against the Saints, and maybe even Menzies as well, because we do still lack that precious small forward. So if he's able to come in and do it. The other one that I do want to touch on for VFL, and I'll come back to D'Ambrosio in a moment, is the man I mentioned just before in Zerk Thatcher. I just want to quickly point out, so for anyone that doesn't really pay attention to the VFL, Zerk Thatcher actually, as a defender, had 25 disposals and took 11 marks. He's one of the best intercept marks in the VFL you will see coming around.
He looks like Steven Silvani at VFL level. It's uncanny how dominant he is at VFL level.
And then he steps up to AFL, and it's like he loses all that confidence. So, there's a lot of talk that he's going to get delisted and all. Just watch a VFL game. You'll see what we're talking about. And look, okay, I get that not every player translates from VFL to AFL, but when you're that good at VFL level, at some point it's got to click at the AFL level. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be with us or if it, someone else. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but Ned Cale actually kicked a couple of goals for Carlton in the VFL on the weekend, which was interesting. Poor old little Ned who couldn't get a game with us. But just back on the 2 mid-season draft pickups, I'll be honest in saying that at the time when we took D'Ambrosio, I was a little bit disappointed because, look, he does look like he's going to be a good player, so I'm more than happy to back him in. I'm not about to say that I think he's going to be, no good, because that would be absolutely ridiculous. But I just looked at that and went, I don't know about another flanker, because I don't know how much we love our flankers. I actually really want to get Josh Carmichael who ended up at because he obviously, for obvious reasons, he's the big body mid who can kick goals. But after seeing him in the VFL, the way he played, the way his left foot works, it was very Daniel Rich-like.
Yeah, he wasn't expressly quick, but he knew when to go. He was very decisive. And when you're not naturally lightning fast, you can make up for that by being a really quick decision maker and moving the ball on quick and just, making quick decisions and disposing of it quickly, because you can't outrun the ball. And that's what he seemed to do really well. Alistair Lord and he seemed to have a really good combination running off halfback, but probably the best game I've seen Alistair Lord play as well. With the mid-season draft strategy, we haven't sort of talked about this since it happened, but it almost seems like we wanted Jai Culley, and if we weren't going to get Jai Culley as a big-bodied midfielder, we were just going to take the guy we thought was going to be the best player long-term, which in the mid-season draft is probably the best strategy, considering how the strike rate on these players are so low, although we seem to be better at picking up SSP and mid-season draft rookies than we do at actually drafting players. So maybe we should just not draft anyone and have 5 mid-season rookie draft picks every year. But yeah, it's interesting. There must be something about Carmichael we didn't like. I know Harlequin Dream mentioned that he's a big body, but he's probably more outside than inside, probably, which I don't know if that factored into our thinking, but I don't know. I don't know what Dodoro is doing at the best of times, but you just have to assume that they're going to look at a big-bodied mid at the end of the year. But I think D'Ambrosio looks an inspired choice, and Jai Menzies, like I said, kicked a couple of snags in a day which wasn't good for small forwards. So, maybe we'll see both of them. We definitely needed Crummer. The ball was hitting the ground on the weekend, and Carlton were just sort of walking it out. So we desperately need him. And I love Matt Guelphy, but I posted this on the Game Day thread. He must be the worst decision maker on our list. Like he cracks in, wins a footy, fantastic, but man alive, he takes forever to make a decision, and it's almost invariably the wrong one, but especially by foot. So we need someone forward to centre that just has a bit more guile, I think. Yeah,
well, if Darcy doesn't get up, and all talks are early that he won't, then obviously we do have room to bring somebody in. And at the moment, I think D'Ambrosio will come in. I think Waterman probably goes out as well. And if Waterman goes out, then Menzies, I think, would get the look in there. Or even Durham. As much as I love Sammy Durham, he was not great on Friday night. His attack on the ball is still very, very good, but he just doesn't get enough of it at the moment.
McGrath to come back in as well. Is that groin?
McGrath as well. That's right. There'll be a couple of changes for Friday night. But actually, just before we move on, I will just point out my man Nick Bryan had 45 hit-outs and dominated the ruck in the VFL on the weekend. But
sorry, can we just quickly talk about Cody Brand?
We can, absolutely.
Yeah, I think just a couple minutes. Best game I've seen him play on the weekend. I try to watch the VFL most weeks. Really assured by foot, really strong intercept games. It's actually uncanny how much he looks like Dustin Fletcher at this point, with the hunch over the shoulders and the light hair and the skinny frame. I really hope he debuts before the end of the year, because he's coming in leaps and bounds. I thought he and Zerk Thatcher absolutely destroyed Carlton's tall forwards on the weekend. And Crocker, who was their full forward, is probably one of the form forwards in the competition, and he got absolutely blanketed by Zerk Thatcher and Brand. So I just thought, it's been a rough trot in the VFL this year, but we're starting to see a few guys, particularly the VFL listed guys, starting to develop a bit. And that's where we might hopefully see some improvement in the seniors, when there's a bit more competition for spots as guys get healthy. Guys like Snelling and Langford, McGrath, those sorts of guys get back. Hopefully we'll start seeing a stronger VFL team and some more competition for spots.
Yeah, the VFL program definitely needs some work in the off-season, regardless of whether people come back, because we have gone from a very strong one to a very poor one. And just on Cody Brand, I think I said earlier in the year that I was pretty keen for him to come in. If I didn't say it on here, I certainly said it on the board that I thought, he'd probably done enough to get a spot. So if they can bring him in, give us another look at a bit of the future, that would be fantastic. But Grizz, I will get you to bring up and I'm going to label it your pet project, because I believe it was your idea. So the all-time Essendon 22 that we were going to discuss, we did last time we discussed this, which was the last podcast we were part of, ask for the nominations from people for who they would have in the last line of defence in our best 22 since 2000.
Yeah, so just a bit of fun. I thought 150 years, the club's doing celebration. We won't go back 150 years because I don't have any expertise of anything earlier than about 1995. But
I was really looking forward to arguing why Albert Thurgood should have been full forward instead of Matthew Lloyd with you.
Well, I'll let you make that argument because I have no evidence to the contrary. But I thought best 22 since 22. So since 2000, the best 22 players, we'll pick them line by line. So the full back line, back pocket, full back, left back pocket. A couple auspices here. We're taking form since 2000. So James Hird probably makes the pick, but we're not picking 1996 James Hird. We're picking 2000 onwards James Hird. Now, James Hird makes the team anyway because he was a premiership captain in 2000. But just to get an idea, sort of Michael Long pre-2000 was probably better than post-2000, but we're judging 2000 onwards. So the full back line, I have 6 nominees. Now, I'm happy for you to debate that another nominee should be added or whatever. I've got 4 nominees on the full back line. I've got Dustin Fletcher, Cale Hooker, Mark Johnson, Sean Wellman, Dean Solomon. And this is going to be, I don't know if I'm going to get hounded down for this, but prime Mark Bagley. Not Mark Bagley the last 2 or 3 years of his career when we tried to shift him forward, but more at his best back pocket Mark Bagley. What's your thoughts on that 6? Do you have any additions, any subtractions to that 6?
Well, the other 2 that got mentioned on the board came in from Jamie, and he's also added Jake Carlisle, which I don't think is a bad shout. But he's also put in Mel Michael, and which again is not a bad shout, but I don't think we could count Mel's form at Brisbane. If we were to take Mel Michael's Brisbane form since 2000 into account, I think he would definitely make the line. But I think, from a Essendon point of view, the fact that we got him to retire and then come back, unretire and turn up to our pre-season training. Look, he was good while he was with us, but he probably wasn't the best of the last 22 years.
He's not out. He's not getting rid of any of those sort of 6 that we mentioned. I had Jake Carlisle as a halfback, but I think that the back 6 are sort of malleable. We can sort of consider him in either. Let's start with some locks. So I think, am I correct in assuming that Dustin Fletcher is a lock?
Yeah, I think you have to lock in Fletcher.
Yeah, so I would have him locked in at fullback. So Dustin Fletcher, obviously games record holder at Essendon, 400 games, one of only, I think it's 5 guys now to have done it, or 4 guys.
4.
To, I think, yeah, 4 guys to have done it.
It's Bartlett, Fletcher, and Harvey.
Yeah, yeah, cult hero.
And Burgoyne, sorry. Burgoyne got to 400, didn't he?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's why I thought it was 5. I think
my apologies.
Boomer and Burgoyne got there after Fletch. So 400 games, 400 plus games, the best kick out in Essendon history. Lots of memories. I remember being at the MCG when he was charging through centre square, kicked the goal from about 75 metres out, just about blew the lid off the MCG. You know, Inspector Gadget himself, I think he walks into this team and gets picked. So are we going with a sort of 3 tall defenders in sort of the modern day?
No, look. I think you're right in terms of Carlisle. I think he probably sits on that half back line. The other one I'd have locked in, I would say, would be Cale Hooker.
Yep, I'm happy to discuss that one. But yeah, Cale's a good shout.
Because purely because I think you do have that. I don't want to call it second tall on the line, but we'll say the second tall because Cale's a very good intercept marker. He's a very good read the play. So between him and Fletch, I think you've sort of locked down in there. I think they would be able to play those roles.
Yeah, I think Dustin has that ability to play tall and small, which helps. My only thought with Cale was he spent a couple of years of his prime as a forward, and I'm just not sure. Like, you know, maybe the Adam Hunter style swingman is important. The other nominations, Mark Johnson, Dean Solomon. I'm going to actually rule out Bagley because I don't think if we're going to pick a back pocket, we're not going to pick Bagley over Mark Johnson.
We're not. I agree with that right away.
Yeah. I just included sort of 6 defenders, and I thought as a genuine small defender, Bagley is probably the second or third best after Johnson and Solomon. So if we're going to pick Hooker in the back pocket, it leaves only one other position on the full back line between Mark Johnson, Sean Wellman, and Dean Solomon. So I think for me, the discussion is Cale Hooker or Sean Wellman, and then the other pocket is Mark Johnson or Dean Solomon. Where do you lean on those 2 debates?
Yeah, so I give it to Johnson and Hooker only because when Wellman played, he had Dustin Fletcher at fullback, so Wellman very much played centre half back. He played that centre half back role, which is where I think he'll end up slotting in this team potentially. Having said that, I still think Jay Carlisle's not a bad shout at centre-half back, although he didn't do that a lot in his prime with us. Also, we do have Michael Hurley's another one.
I was about to say Michael Hurley's a two-time All-Australian.
But look, I think purely if you're going to go with where they played, I think Hooker probably played that last defender a lot more than Wellman did, which is why I'd have him there. And as hard as Dean Solomon was, I don't think there was a better back pocket player for probably a good 4 or 5 year stretch there for Mark Johnson. I think he gets left out a lot compared to his not brother Jason Johnson when we talk about hard nuts who hit the ball. And again, you got Damien Hardwick as another one who people
actually, I don't know why I went Bagley ahead of Damien Hardwick. That's sacrilege.
But Damien Hardwick again, I think, is probably the next line up rather than deep fullback, because I do have memories of Mark Johnson being that last man. If you look at the 2000 grand final, I'd be fairly confident in saying that Mark Johnson went to Jeff Farmer and kept him relatively quiet in that game as opposed to anyone else.
Yeah. Mark Johnson's a good shout. Very good small defender. I think he won a best and fairest, did he? Or if not, he came very close. Finished second a couple of times. A classic Sheedy sort of back pocket. I think, it was tough for me. Like Dean Solomon, people think of Dean Solomon as this thug, and he was by the time he went to Fremantle. There's no debating that. But prime Dean Solomon from 2000, 2002 was an exceptional footballer. A really good size, a lot thinner than what I remember when he went to Fremantle. He basically turned into key position size by the time he finished up with us. But in his prime, he was an absolute specimen, a real hard nut. He and Mark Johnson on that fullback line in the 2000 grand final were terrifying. Could you imagine being a small forward going down and you've got Hardwick, Johnson and Solomon walking towards you? You'd just about to pack it in, wouldn't you? Like, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, and you're right. He was amazing at that point, but I think you sort of summed it up well when we talked about Johnson the best and fairest, because he did win the best and fairest in 2002.
Yeah.
So for mine, I would go Cale Hooker, Dustin Fletcher, and then Mark Johnson as the third.
Yeah. It was sort of Mark Johnson, when he went to Fremantle, I remember thinking that was one of the weirdest things. Do you remember there was that period where it seemed like everyone in our team was going to Fremantle? There was Mark Johnson, Dean Solomon, Kepler Bradley, Adam McPhee went back there. Like, it just seemed like all our players sort of got traded to Fremantle at one point in time. But I don't know if I can argue with any of those players, to be honest. I loved Dean Solomon, and maybe he's that seventh defender, but I think that seventh defender spot, I think since 2000, defence has been our strongest position in terms of like the quality of players we've had there. I think there's a few forwards that pick themselves, but I think there's probably greater depth in defence, and I think that seventh defender position, when we pick, it's going to be hotly contested. So, for the 22 in 22, officially, the full-back line reads Mark Johnson, Dustin Fletcher, Cale Hooker, in that order. I'm happy with that full-back line. That's going to keep most forward lines pretty quiet, I would have thought.
Yeah, and just on Mark Johnson, I'm not sure if you remember this, but he was actually training with North Melbourne at the end of 2007 after he got let go. And he was all lined up to be drafted then, and I think Freo sort of swooped out of nowhere, and then he actually managed to play his 200th against us at Docklands. So he actually managed to play his 200th at basically what was his home stadium in front of his basically home fans. And we rolled them by 4 points just to really rub it in his face.
To rub it in. Do you remember like his last game? Was it his last game for us, or maybe it was in the VFL? It was the VFL. He wasn't picked to play. He was playing for the Bendigo Bombers, and he just kept on starting fights because it was Kevin Sheedy's last game, and he so desperately wanted to be in the match. And so the fact that he was playing VFL, he just started brawls everywhere in the VFL. I just remember, because I remember watching the Bendigo Bombers at the time, who was our affiliate, thinking, what is Mark Johnson doing?
Yeah. So he actually played his last game of the week before against Richmond at the MCG when we lost, and James Hird said in his press conference after that it'd be the first time in his career that he would have nothing to play for, because we couldn't make finals, and there was no next year. So it was a weird day, that one. But I think, Grizz, now we've locked in that full backline. That will probably do us for this evening, mate. Been a pleasure as always. So obviously next week we're looking for nominations for the half back line.
Yeah, I think so. We'll continue with this next week. So this is obviously halfbacks and other halfback flank. And like we've alluded to already, this is going to be another really hotly contested line, I think. Some very good players are going to miss out.
Yeah, so some names I'm just going to quickly throw out. Michael Hurley, Adam Sahard, even though he didn't play that long for us, he was still very good at what he did. You got Damien Hardwick, even Connor McKenna. Jordan Ridley, I think, has probably got a shout somewhere in there as well.
Sean Wellman, Adam Ramanauskas.
Yeah, Ramanauskas is another one. So there's you're right. There's going to be plenty of names, I think, that could be nominated. So by all means, reach out on the socials. Let us know who you think it is, and we'll discuss that next week.